Welcome to the Directors UK podcast. We're the professional association for UK film and TV directors. No matter the format, no matter the genre, our featured directors share their approach to the craft. We hope you enjoy.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Toyin and I'm the Member Engagement and Events Manager here at Directors UK. Tonight we have in conversation Edward Berger and Susanna White on Conclave.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, everybody. I expect you're just taking in the ending right now. I know it stayed with me for, till I woke up. So I saw it the first time last night, and it was with me when I woke up this morning. I'm sure you're all agreed it's an extraordinary film. So congratulations, Ed.
Thank you so much.
So can you tell us a bit about how it came to you?
Well, it came to me, how it came to me is here, is the producer Tessa Ross. I heard her laugh there. So she has a wonderful laugh. And we had met about maybe, 8 years ago, maybe in Cannes. Sounds very, very fancy, but it was just sort of we had a water on some terrace. And we really got along. And then she sent me a script once in a while, and I never liked them. And then she said, I think I've got a really good one that you might like. And I asked who wrote it, and she said, Peter Strawn.
Okay,
and I love Peter
Strawn.
And I said, I'll read it right away, because I think whenever I read a script of his, they're always the best ones. So that's how it came.
And how different was that script that you read from the film we've ended up with now?
Well, Peter is such a good writer, and Tessa is a very good producer, so it was a very good script. And I think, it's more like the maybe a little bit of the tone or some scenes or cutting things and changing some speeches, for example. Always also updating. I think the Carlos' speech that he gives in the end, we probably updated that 5-6 times, because there was or many more times, 20 times, because it was a very difficult speech to write, because a lot of it was writing on it, and the times are changing. So kind of the feeling of the times kept creeping into the tone of it. I don't know what else. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things changed, but the general basis was very strong, and then you keep refining it and working on it. And we didn't send the script to Rafe until probably 4 years in or so. It just takes a long time.
Really? So how long was that development then? Do you remember?
How long?
Yes, which year it came to you?
It was 5 years ago.
Right.
And Tessa has probably had it, for 8 years? Yeah. But it wasn't like, she was making a movie.
Yeah,
I was making a movie.
Things, of course.
And, it wasn't the whole time, but we knew, and we felt like at some point it was ready to share with Rafe. And then he really responded to it. I think he called back in 2 weeks and said, okay, can we meet? This is very interesting to me. Or even within a week, it was very quick.
He's so wonderful in the film, and we'll come to that. To me, it's one of the most delicious things, many delicious aspects of this film, and many sort of extraordinary technical achievements in this film. But
and by the way, it's really, to do these. I was actually shooting All Quiet, the movie I did before, and we had many times Zoom session over the weekend. Peter, Tessa, and I, and they're never, it's never questioning the real structure or the whole script. It's always just, this is the scene really the right one, or maybe it needs a little bit, or the ending changed a bunch of times, and at some point he was walking out on the Pope's balcony, we at some point then we felt, we've kind of seen it before. It's the typical. As you might notice, there's not much Rome in this movie. It's all off camera, because we all have seen those images, and the Pope on the balcony we've kind of seen. So kind of to keep that off camera and just stay with Rafe felt then more interesting. These type of things, evolved, and we did those on weekend Zoom sessions, and once in a while getting together and rereading it with fresh eyes and thinking, oh, we could do even better.
I think that freshness is fantastic. From that opening shot, walking through the underpass, to the people smoking, it's constantly subverting and surprising. And the way that the contemporary comes in and sort of constantly just kind of tickles you up and wakes you up. And, you're never in a cliche ecclesiastical image. There's always something fresh about it. And I'm sure you worked very hard at that, didn't you? Did you set yourself
I think at
rules?
some point I made a sort of an image collection, a lookbook or whatever you want to call it, and sent it to Tessa and said, I think you should put some images of ecclesiastical architecture there, because I don't think there was any in it. It's just like car tunnels and things like that. And then I thought, okay, I'll put some in. It's probably like a Protestant upbringing, which shies away from the it's a bit more Scandinavian, starker, rather than opulent Roman. That's sort of my sensibility in a way, and that's why we build things like the Casa Santa Marta. It doesn't look like that in real life, but we kind of wanted it to build it almost, almost like harshly fluorescent light, straight, and like a prison, a little bit like a brutalist jail cell, so that you can really feel that relief when in the end, they're locked away. They're in a prison for two weeks, and then by the end, when they have the Pope, the blinds, the shutters go up, and that you as an audience and Rafe, it kind of feels like life is coming back in, and suddenly you hear those nuns, that female laughter, dressed in white, waving in, and sunlight coming in, and everything, life comes back in. So that was very important to design that Casa Santa Marta like different from reality, and as opposed to that ecclesiastical architecture.
All those oppositions are very interesting, the light and the dark, and the modern. And
that comes very much from, in that lookbook that I was talking about, I had many images of Pakula movies. That actually everything was Pakula. Because I thought it's a really interesting setting for a political thriller, because usually they're set in big cities or in Washington D.C. And Pakula was a master. I love how he used to I'm sure you know the movies, right? All the President's Men and Parallax View and those things, and the architecture, the harsh lines in those movies and the shadows. And then just silhouettes in the dark, like Warren Beatty would be just a silhouette in a wide shot for 2 minutes, talking with his back to us, and do that as a director with your star, biggest star in the 70s, and producer on the movie. But you learn so much from these movies, because he would be, and we try to learn from it. Warren Beatty would be, in the dark with his back to us, and at the right moment, Pakula cuts around. And shows his face, and suddenly those lines, you realize this director is directing me as an audience member of how to look and how to listen and where to listen and what to pay attention to. And I really value that in his work.
I could really feel you doing that in the movie. There's a moment after the Pope has died when you're on John Lithgow, and anyone else would have stayed and come around onto his face. And you just cut off. And I don't know if that was your choice or the editor's choice or a mutual choice, but I thought it was such a sort of bold thing to do, because it just left me wanting to get inside that man's head.
Yeah, I mean, I really like filming people from behind.
Yes.
Because it gets me, Rafe always had a shot from here, because it gets me inside their head, and I'm basically their ears. And like I see what they see, but at the same time you put the focus on. I love putting the focus on just the back of the eye, and basically I sense what they see, but I'm more inside his brain and thinking about what he's seeing. Yeah, and so I mean it's such and I'm editing a movie right now, and just by changing, shifting the cut 2 seconds to the left and cutting to an empty shot of it just changes everything. It just changes what the characters feel, and therefore what you feel when you watch it. It's just a miracle what editing and camera positioning does.
And there's so much precision about this film. I think one of the things I loved was how you control the energy of the film, that it modulates the metabolism of the film, shifts so subtly, and you're, from that opening where you're practically inside Rafe's body, hearing his breathing as he's rushing to get to the Pope, to moments of they're just very delicate slow-mo. Or even that wonderful, wonderful shot of the umbrellas. It's almost like a Japanese print to me, the umbrellas floating across the courtyard. I mean, what was your process? How much did you storyboard? Did you previs? What was your approach?
Before I forget, by the way, the breathing comes from, like the first time Rafe saw the movie is me and Ben Barrett, the sound designer, getting him into the ADR booth and telling him, now you're going to watch the movie and you're just going to react to it and just breathe it. Yeah, so a lot of that is from that 2-hour or 3-hour breathing session and he just reacted to, holding his breath. And it just does so much of taking us and feeling what he feels, hopefully, at least to me.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
The process is, I plan a lot because I'm terrified of not knowing what I'm going to do on the day, and everybody coming and saying, "So what do we do?" And I say, you have to have an answer. And even though I usually don't, so it's about Stefan, the cinematographer, and I sat for about 8 weeks, shot listing every single scene, and really indeed, and not just shot listing, okay, we need a wide shot, really editing the film. I think sort of shot 1 is, walking with Rafe. Shot 2 is we need a reverse, and shot 3 is this detail, cut back to his face, how he see, really editing the shots. Because I need to be able to imagine it. Because then also on set, you kind of know that take wasn't so good, but the pieces I actually have. It's not that you then stop shooting it, but it kind of gives you confidence that you have it, and then still do 5 more takes anyway. But
and that was a new collaboration, was it?
Huh?
That was a new collaboration with
Stefan and I was a new collaboration. I mean, I tried before on this television show that was called Patrick Melrose, and he was interested. Eventually, didn't. But that's when I first zoomed with him, and that's where I met James Friend, my other camera person, on Patrick Melrose, who wasn't available here. So I had to venture into the world and find somebody new. And the election scenes, because we had so many of them, and I was terrified that they would be boring or repetitive. So I storyboarded all of them, just to have a progression and to be able to know, this close-up I already used for that scene. I'm not going to shoot the same close-up. It's got to be a different lens. It's got to be a slightly different position. It's got to be a slightly different eye line. Just really I never wanted to do the same shot twice, in a way. Every scene needed to, Rafe was progressing through the film. He was feeling differently. He was in doubt. He was suddenly suspicious of someone. So the camera needs to feel different as well. It needs to portray that, needs to be able to capture that, to support the performance that he gives.
Well, and a wonderful one. How much of that performance, what was that process of working with Rafe? How many choices were his choices? How did you modulate those choices? Did you talk a lot about the journey he'd go on? What was your process of working with him?
Well, the nicest conversation we had was actually the first one. Well, actually, the first one we just went to after he was in a theater show, and Tessa and I went to see him and went to dinner, and they said, "Okay, great, I'll do it." And then at some point, I think he had suddenly like. Actors get cold feet suddenly. They get, I said yes, and what if this director's an idiot? And, actually maybe the script isn't that good, and maybe I'm not right, and whatever. And then he suddenly called, and I could feel in his, and he's like very transparent with his emotions, like he's not good at hiding it very well, So he was kind of out of breath and saying, I was just wondering if you're, like, what you're interested, are you interested in, and I had the feeling he'd probably just reread it and had a panic attack that I just wanted to make a thriller. And so are you interested in this detective story, or are you interested in this, in my journey of doubt, in this character's journey of doubt? And I was absolutely interested in that interior journey, much more than what sells us the movie and what makes the movie entertaining. But you need that emotional core, and that's whenever you have a script of Peter's, there's always the second layer, and that's, what is the film really? What's the heart? What's the soul of the movie? And Peter has a big soul, so you can find it in the script. And then the challenge is to try to put that on into a film. And that, that inner journey of doubt, that was our main concern, that we portray that well. And because I think a lot of us can identify with that. I have doubts all the time. Should I probably wake up like Rafe? Should I even be doing this movie? Should I be doing something else? Am I the right person? Should I not make movies at all? Should I be like something else? And so Rafe and I went to dinners a lot once in Rome, and just leafed through the script and talked about each scene and what we wanted out of it, what I thought how it would work. He thought what he was interested in, just sharing that, and just sort of building a relationship, basically, because that man is going to be in front of the camera every single day, and is going to have to make himself vulnerable and undress, basically, in front of 150 people. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So, it's about building this trust, and for me to trust him, that he's the right person to bring this to life, and especially for him to trust me and us, the crew, of how to do it. And so that was mainly talking, and then we rehearsed. I don't really rehearse that much because I don't know. But I rehearsed the ones that I'm afraid of, that I don't quite know how to do, or that where I know it's going to be such a tough day. That's, for example, the sitting around the Pope's bed in the beginning, the kneeling. 5 new characters introduced. Each of them's going to need a close-up or some kind of shot. Rafe sees a lot of things, all these details. That was like 40 shots or something. So it's a lot to get through in a day. I think
he's also speaking multiple languages, isn't he? Because he's got
Rafe?
Right, doesn't he? Doesn't he speak Italian?
In the movie, he doesn't in real life.
No, in real life, but exactly. But even in that scene, doesn't he?
He speaks Latin,
he has Italian, English.
But he mostly observes, So I rehearsed that scene, but it was mainly, asking Lucian, Lucian, you're probably standing here, or this is where you're kneeling. John Lithgow, you're kneeling next to Rafe. I wanted across from Stanley so that they could look at each other as their friend. And so just those positions, right? And in a not even in a set, but in some kind of office with a bed inside, that I've just had there from props, and it said this will be approximately the dimension of the set, and this is where you'll be kneeling. And Rafe, it'd be good, I'd love you to look at the glasses, and just to get them familiar with this. And then on the day, on the set, it's about it's Ray Fiennes. It's not like I'm going to say, I don't think you really were that good in this, I think you didn't have your character. He has his character better than I have, because he spends, that's his job. I mean, he thinks about it all the time. I think about other things, and that, but not as deeply as Rafe, and especially I don't feel it like he does. So
but those modulations, because is it twice or three
then
times he cries in the movie?
He's a lovely person. He just said, "What do you think? Should I try one like this?" And I go like, "Yeah, let's do it." Or I would go. Peter was for 6 of the 8 weeks he was next to me, except when we didn't shoot dialogue. Then he was home in bed, lazy.
No, Isabella
but he was just
Rossellini.
interested in the dialogue, and then so he. But it was so great that I was able. We did a take, and then I would turn to Peter and say, "What do you think? Is it 2, 3? I don't do that many takes. Maybe I would say 4, maybe sometimes 2, sometimes 5." Something like that, but not really 10 of like a simple, unless it's let's say John Lithgow and Rafe, there's a long dialogue scene where there's like a 2-minute scene where it's just one push in, that I might do 10 times, just because I know I'm not going to edit, and just because that's actually quite fast to get, unless you have it on the first one, then you can also stop. But that probably took 10 times. I would turn to Peter, and I would ask him, after maybe take 2, what do you think? Like, can we? Was that good? Can we do better? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything Rafe is missing? And Peter, as he had lived with the script even longer than I have. He had written it. He had heard it differently inside of him. Probably spoken to himself, like in front of the computer, trying to find the right words. And sometimes he would say, "Yeah, no, it's really good. This is one line. Maybe I was thinking that kind of feeling that I wrote it with this underneath. This was the agenda in it." And I was like, "Oh, that's good." And I went to Rafe, sold it as my idea. And said like, "Rafe, I was thinking, you should say it with this." And Rafe would say like, "Oh, that's a really good idea." And he'd do it, and then he would do it, and it was wonderful. And so, like, things like that, like you just have 4 eyes, which is much better than just 2 eyes.
Fantastic. And Peter clearly loved that. I was at Q&A with him last night, and he was saying, "Oh God, normally, day 1 on a film set, it's really exciting, and taking everything in is wonderful. Day 2, you're completely bored and you're wondering why everything takes so long." And he said, "But I stayed for weeks and weeks and weeks." And he obviously loved having your trust, and yeah, I'm sure the film's all the richer for that. Let's talk about your designer, Susie. What were the big ideas you discussed with her? And also a bit, you've shot in Rome at wonderful Cinecittà, but a lot of the time we're not really seeing Rome. We're in this interior world. Can you talk a bit about the choices and the discussions you had with Susie?
That was part of it. Let's not do the postcards that we know, St. Peter's or so. I think we had one shot of St. Peter's in the beginning. Rafe is walking by that square, which we cut out in the end because it felt like it's more interesting to just be in the tunnel, and which could be anywhere essentially. And so we talked a lot about the contrasts of the ecclesiastical versus the starkness, to not. I think. I mean, you said something very kind earlier about the change of pace and the difference. I mean, I think movies live a lot of a change of pace, a change of tone, a change of contrast. Loud, quiet, dark, light, different location, and still they have to feel like they're part of the same fabric. Yeah, and to find that in Rome, where, a lot of restrictions in Rome, wonderful city, but you can't shoot everywhere. So, and we had a lot of locations, like very little is actually on stage. The Sistine Chapel is on stage, and that marble corridor and the rooms of the cardinals are on stage. Everything else is location. So there's a lot of location work. And to find those puzzle pieces and to create that contrast and still have it feel as one was a very long process. I think Tessa was getting a little bit worried that we would fly to Rome 5 times and said, "No, we need another trip to find it."
Oh,
I mean, it's always like all of you will know that I was location scouting probably to the last day of the and probably even finding locations during the shoot.
wow. But those craftsmen in Italy, I found working in Italy, the quality of the set deck, the painters, there's a real artistry. I mean, I thought it's hard to believe that Sistine Chapels are built. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, Susie's wonderful in creating, and also, because of Tessa, we didn't have much money.
Tessa's getting a lot of blame here.
Yeah, absolutely. Praise and blame. Yeah. It's perfect to have a producer. You can put all of that on them. No, we had, it's not easy to raise money for movies, as you know, and they always never have enough money. And Susie's brilliant in terms of, fulfilling everyone's wishes, which means director's wishes and producer's wishes, which means to stay, and my wish is also, I don't want to go over budget. I want to stay in the budget. And we couldn't find this bloody corridor. And there are a lot of corridors in Rome, and there's a lot of line producers who will say, well, we saw 20 corridors, why don't you take one? Yeah, because they're not long enough, or they're not graphic enough, or there's the windows are on one side, but we want it to be sequestered, or whatever. There was always something wrong with it. And eventually we said, why don't we push the set? Susie said it, I think, or Mike Jackman, one of the producers, I forget, said, why don't we push, if we're going to shoot this corridor, we're going to be there for 3 days and have to paint it and everything. Why don't we push the Sistine Chapel off to the side in our stage and build it right next to it? And all so that corridor was basically just a tiny, wasn't wider than 12 feet or so, the space where we built it in. And then off to that, there was actually just one cardinal's room, the Pope's chambers that we built. And Susie was very, very good in just shuffling furniture around and slightly changing each character's room and still make it feel like it's their room. Like John Lithgow would have a little bit of a more pompous room because he's a pompous guy. and Rafe would have a very stark room because he's a monk. Yeah. And so, but it's all the same room. So it's just one set. It's always the same 4 walls. And she would push a cupboard in front of a door or something like that, and therefore change the layout.
Fantastic. And I thought all that fascist architecture was fantastic as well in a movie about power.
There's this, I really wanted to shoot everything there, but a little bit too much fascism maybe. So Mussolini probably did one interesting thing in Italy, which is built that city sort of outside of besides wreaking a lot of havoc over the country, but he built Euro, which is outside of Rome, a really stunning sort of what is it, like they do congresses there and things, and an office park. And for example, when they board the buses, that is there, and when the cardinals walk down those white marble steps in here, and that is all there. And you'll recognize it from, the Conformist shot there, and Fellini shot a bunch of his films there. 8.5 is partly there, and so it's a very interesting, that architecture is great.
Did you ever have a dark night of the soul where you thought, how can I make a thriller out of this? Is it going to stay great? Or did you have confidence in the script?
No, I didn't. Well, I had confidence in the script, but then you lose it when you shoot it, because you're going to hear those dialogues. That's why Peter was also invaluable, because you hear it like 50 times a day, the same lines for week in, and there's a lot of dialogue in the movie, so you hear for week in and out, you hear dialogue, you shoot people talking, which I actually absolutely don't like. and I can't write it myself, like All Quiet, if you watch All Quiet, they say like 7 words. They'd say like, I'm hungry, do you have some food? And I'm cold, that's about the extent of the dialogue. And Peter writes these elaborate 4-page dialogue scenes. I was panicking and thinking, and then you shoot it, and for a whole week, only words. That's why I was also very relieved to go into the Sistine Chapel. Finally, people stopped talking. So you have all these words. I kept telling Cesar, like, all I do is talk. Is this going to be interesting? And I said, yeah, it's really interesting. And you have to remind yourself, actually the hardest thing is to resist temptation to do something fancy. Because you think, like, something camera fancy. Start building silly circular tracks around people that are sitting, with no motivation, just because you think, like, well, I've shot a close-up, why don't we do something else? You sometimes turn up like that. You've had it planned, static, and suddenly you think, like, maybe you should build the crane. And then you realize, wait a second, when I read it, I thought it was really interesting. Yeah. That innocence, to preserve that innocence of being invested in these characters, which you inevitably will lose one day, not all days, but one day or 1 hour of the day. At the 11th hour, you think, oh my God, another close-up of a guy talking. How interesting can that be? And
but
to have Peter then and say, is this going to be interesting? Just tell me. And he says, yeah, it's going to be interesting. And that gives you, that helps you resist the temptation of not shooting it properly.
And I'm sure you'll agree that the brilliance of the film is that it's a thriller that comes out of the interior emotional layers of these characters and watching that unfold and having the secrets come out or the tensions over whether they will be revealed. And it's such an achievement. Tell us a bit about working with Nina Gold and the casting process.
Well, I've done, 4 TV series or movies with Nina, I forget the exact number. And it's so we know each other really well. And she's just she just has great ideas, and we just sit and talk and send pictures to each other. I think this movie started, sort of the casting process started with just putting pictures on a wall, and Rafe was always on there. And then eventually, sort of, he's in the middle, and then you start aligning pictures around him, images of other actors like Stanley, someone who would feel the opposite. And Nina is just great with being able to talk about these, and also, again, to resist the temptation of, let's say, the bigger name, or the whatever the temptation might be, or you might want to get to know that actor, but he's kind of, so it's is that an answer?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Was there, people speak different languages in the film. Was there ever a moment where there was pressure to have it all in English?
Tessa gave me pressure. It's so wonderful to blame her. I remember. First of all, she's the best producer you can ever imagine. So that's why I'm able to talk like this. But for example, during the and I'm actually quite proud. That's probably the one thing I'm quite proud of it. I remember during we had a wonderful read-through. It was the first time that we all heard the script aloud, read by all these wonderful actors, and hearing things like Brian F. O'Byrne bringing a tone of lightness into. I mean, he's so good, it's so important that he's there with that touch of lightness or fumbliness that he has with that role, so that not everyone. Rafe is very earnest, and if the next guy is also earnest, it's going to be really heavy. So those counter poles are really important. So to hear these people, and there was one person, Sergio Castellito, who basically said, when we cast him, he said, like, oh yeah, I can speak English. Yeah, no problem. And then basically he doesn't speak English. And so he does this entire thing in Italian, and 3 lines are maybe in English, in very broken English, so that I'm thinking I'm going to take those away from him and make them in Italian. And I loved it because it makes it international, and it is Italian. I mean, we're in bloody Italy, so they better speak Italian. And I hate movies. I'm from Switzerland and Germany, and you know, when English people put on Nazi uniforms and speak English and pretend they're German Nazis, it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. And so I was thinking, I'm not going to do the same thing, you know. And when certain movies pretend to be Italian, you know, I just don't buy it. You know, immediately I find it imperialistic. Actually, I find it rude. You know, and Rafe's character was called Lomeli originally, and then we decided, it should be. We looked for an Italian. Obviously, there's no Italian who's going to play this guy who can get the movie finance. So it was going to be an English or American actor. So we changed it, and the part was, you know, there was no way in my mind that Rafe was going to play Italian. I mean, that would be absolutely ridiculous. And so we changed it to Lawrence, you know, but of course he's a character that has lived in Italy for 30 years, 40 years, but he's probably studied there. He's had, like, all of his colleagues are Italian. So as much Italian as possible while making the movie digestible for international audiences and English. So, and he was great, and he wanted to, I got to learn Italian, I got to speak, and he has a very good ear for Italian and Latin, and we had someone coach him every day and correct his language if he made a mistake on set. And he was very, very particular about that. But anyway, back to the read-through. So Sergio does everything in Italian. I find him hilarious. Yeah, he's so wonderful, and he brings such a good energy into the movie. And after the read-through, Tessa comes to me, and Juliette, her wonderful partner, says, like, he's got to do more English. He's got to, and Peter Strawn also. They got to do more English. We got to do more English. There's too much Italian. And I was thinking, that's great. And whenever it was Italian, I was really enjoying it because it felt authentic to me. And also, I mean, I understand most of it, sort of, through Roman language. I don't know, you kind of get the gist of it. Maybe if you speak English the whole time and everyone in the world speaks English, it's not like that. I don't know. But you kind of get the energy of, and people don't have, if you take Italian from Sergio, he's only a quarter as good. I know it from when I see, we have a lot of Danish actors in German language movies. Ulrich Thomsen, great actor from the, what's the feast, das Fest? Festen, yeah. He speaks very bad German, but thinks he's good. But his accent is too strong. He speaks good German, but with a very thick, and I can see how he's struggling with his mouth, and his thoughts don't catch up with the language. We take the biggest tool that this actor has, his language, one of the biggest, we take away from him. And if you take that away from Sergio, he's not going to be funny, he's just going to say lines that he doesn't really, and luckily, I was able to say, well, you cast the wrong person then, because he's not going to speak English, he can't. Like, I tried to, like, teach him one or two lines, it sounded awful. And so they had no choice but to accept Sergio's Italian, which is now a total asset. Or, I'm sorry, it's a long story, but for example, Carlos Diaz, he's not an actor. We found him, we needed someone like him who felt truthful when you film him, what he says in the end, you know, and that's very hard to say without us going, that's not true, that can't, you know, it's just a guy, you know, like he doesn't have a uterus, I don't believe it, you know, and to be able to say those lines, there has to be something in
something so pure
a purity, a sensitivity, whatever it is, and he had it. I believe when I look into his eyes, I say, yeah, I think that could be true. And we had the speech that he delivers in the end. He did it in English. And somehow, it was good. It wasn't the best speech I've ever heard. Because it's, you know, he's thinking about what he has to say and he's struggling with the words slightly, just like I'm struggling. And then, and we reshot it in Spanish. And he's just much better because we felt the prayer that he does in the beginning. We had seen that, and he was just so much better when he starts speaking Spanish. And so to be able to go back and say, like, let's just do it in Spanish. And and what better excuse than shoot among a group of cardinals who come from all over the world? They should speak what they speak.
Well done for holding your nerve, because I think it gives
Sergio couldn't do it.
I just wanted to ask you a bit about the soundtrack and the music, which does work in a thriller way, but also is often in counterpoint. So can you talk about, because this is a very long relationship you've had, isn't it, with the composer?
Yes. Probably like 10 years or something, yeah? Or 8 maybe. Well, I do like, somehow, I get really bored watching movies and I realize, they're taking out the strings and now I'm supposed to feel this and yeah, it's emotional, but the music is telling me that it's emotional. I just kind of switch off and it doesn't impact me. And with folk, I always have this feeling of, and a lot of people are hiding what they feel. Rafe is hiding what he feels, like he's just thinking, but inside of him there's a really tug of war going on. And I'm always interested in what that sounds like, like let's try to find what the sound of that it's inside Rafe's stomach and make music out of it, and it's kind of grumbling or, the cliche says English people are not very good at having outbursts and being very emotional. So, but it's probably very much inside of you, right? And it's inside of Rafe. And so to find the sound of that and wanting to get out and was interesting to me, and sometimes, I see it in his face or that it's inside and we try to find sounds for that.
So did that happen just once you got into the edit, or had you got any music earlier in the process?
No, I didn't. And this movie was very hard to find temp music for. I basically couldn't find it. We didn't really have the tone of the film changed completely with the music. I mean, with finding the right music. We had it was a lot of trying, and then it's like, yeah, it's good, and doesn't quite work. And again, Tessa was instrumental here in terms of pushing us. I was there was a certain point in the film where I was very happy with the music. And as I said, we didn't find temp music, so the film was completely new score. The only temp music we really had found was the opening cues until the credits. And that was from Birth, Jonathan Glazer's movie. There was one cue with sort of timpanis that I liked and we put in. And eventually we threw it out and Volker composed something that, of course, is going to be influenced by that somehow. Doesn't sound like it, but it's going to be influenced. And we had another screening, and it's all original music, and Tessa kept saying, like, it's really good, but just something, you're not quite telling us what kind of movie this is now, still. And I was thinking, what the hell does she mean? I don't know what she means, and laboring over this for weeks and keep editing and eventually I woke up and I thought, you know what? We had never replaced the Glazer stuff. It's a different movie. It's from Birth. It's not from ours. And be much more develop the tone of the movie as it goes on. And that all falls into place. And I called Volker and he said, you're right. Well, let me try something. And then he just tried something and it became this engaging, more violent, sort of repressed outburst from the beginning that culminates in that credit, quite crescendo credit, like opening credit music. And you know what was so gratifying the other day, and I had a screening in New York, I think, and this woman came up to me and she said, I knew nothing about the movie, and then I come in and someone says to me, it's about cardinals, and I go, oh, okay. And then the light goes down, and from the first note on, I knew it was a thriller, and then I could relax. And so that push was really important. It was quite fulfilling that apparently for some, at least for this woman, it signaled we finally found the tone of the film. You know?
Well, an amazing combination of talent. Tessa, you, Peter Strawn, based on an extraordinary book in the first place. Incredible cast. So much to love about it. Okay, let's have some questions.
I really enjoyed the film.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to ask about the humour that's in it, because I noticed, even though you say it's a thriller, there's a lot of elements almost like farce in there, and there's a lot of visual humour as well too. Like I noticed the curtsy was played in a wide shot, and the great shot of the turtle at the end, and but it was also very moving too. And I wanted to know, just you mentioned about storyboards, what is your approach to balancing tone with something like this, where you're hitting comedy and thriller at the same time in places?
Well, I learned very early on. I made my first film was like I wanted to make a really serious film, yeah, a very earnest film, and an important like your first movie, and you want to be a serious filmmaker. And then I was sitting in the screening in the premiere, and it was like silent, and I was like, oh my God, this is done. And I remember there was one, like in halfway through the movie, there's one joke, like one humorous thing, and people just laughed so much, and I was so relieved. And for the next 10 minutes, I relaxed. I was like, okay, good. And then you get anxious again. So whenever there is an opportunity for lightness, also in All Quiet, I knew, these people are dying, and you're in the mud, and it's ugly, and so have them smile. When they smile, and for them it's normal anyway. So why not just find it just helps so much to digest a potentially heavy movie. And so whenever there's the opportunity for subtle, I don't like loud depends. I love Dumb and Dumber. It's a really fun movie, but it might be the wrong kind of humor here. So in this type of thing, subtle, but any kind of lightness I knew that out of the contrast of, let's say, the cassocks and iPhones, or cassocks and vapes, and cassocks and espresso machines, you could find humor, but you never know if it, and then you lean into that, if not too much, but you never know if it's going to land until you finally have a screening like here. Because, it's only, it's a small group of people watching it, and we all have seen it so many times, so it's really a kind of I don't know, the balance, it's kind of a guessing game. It's intuition, it's stomach, but especially in dark films, if there's a little bit of lightness, I personally enjoy it.
Great. Next question. On the right there.
Hi, congratulations. It's a fantastic film, and it's a very beautiful film. But what I want to ask is, when you get to the smaller rooms, and you're shooting either square on or a lot into corners, I noticed, through doorways, is that motivated, do you think, by the characters, or by where we are in the story, or by you as a filmmaker?
I think it's usually I try to put the camera in a position that represents how the characters are feeling at that point. And let's say the decision for corners or walls or through doorways is a lot the feeling of being sequestered, being boxed in, being shut away. So whenever I have the opportunity to give that feeling, I went for it. And so it's usually from what Rafe is feeling. I notice that I respond to films where I can hang my hat on one character, and I can, especially as a director, and I can sort of design the movie around what that person feels, what the music is like, where the camera is, how the lighting is. It's all about how Rafe feels inside at that given moment in the movie. So that usually determines where the camera goes. And that happens on the page with Stefan, but it also happens, I didn't finish this before, or didn't say it, that also happens when I don't tell Rafe that I have a whole shot list and that I have a storyboard, and so I usually just go, okay, what do we do? Or he asked me, and I say, I would think, you would sit over there, and maybe Carlos comes in, and let's just rehearse and sort of find it. And usually it ends up of where I thought it would be, but sometimes it doesn't, because Rafe has another idea, or Carlos has another idea, and I suddenly go, oh, that's much better. Maybe we should then, and then we change all the plan. But you then have that plan, let's say you always wanted to do that shot through the door, so I know I can still get it, and it's a big part of them. And usually I'm really into finding 1, 2, 3 shots that are special in the scene, not just, you're going to have to, in a dialogue movie like this, most of the times, unless, it's tableaus or something, but most of the times it's going to be a classical coverage, like a shot and a reverse shot and a close-up, but to find those special shots that make that scene special. Yeah, and I spent a long time, by the way, shooting transitions, which a lot of people that look at the schedule go like, do we really need this? The guy walking from there to there. And I always think, yes, we do, because it takes us to the next emotional level. I don't want to show off the location, but I have a little bit of time to get with Rafe to where he needs to be for the next scene, or, the emotion changes too quickly. But, where that door thing came also from, I've never said this before, but I'll reveal this secret. I wanted to shoot the movie in 4:3 because we tested it, and all of us thought it's really beautiful. It's wonderful. And eventually we decided, we had the choice, you can do it, but you're going to lose $3 million of your budget. It's just a reality. Television stations are not going to pay as much for the film. And then Stefan, Tessa, and I kind of confirmed and said, are we going to do this? Or are we going to find a language with shadow and doorways that gives us still the feeling of something else, and have at least get people paid properly and have a halfway decent schedule, which was still too tight.
Thank you. Brilliant. Absolutely loved it from beginning to end. Just wondering, in terms of your own career, because you seem to do a lot of television as well, and prep, shooting, post, as we know, television is really, really fast. Can you tell us a bit the process on this one? Was it much longer than you would normally have for such a big movie with this level of stars? And then going back to television, how does that feel in comparison to film?
It doesn't feel that different. I mean, to me, it's all the same. It doesn't really matter if it's a movie or... And you're never going to have enough time, and you're never going to have enough money. That's just a rule of... It doesn't matter what you do. It's just a rule of thumb. And maybe that's also not the worst thing, because you have to think of, find solutions and not get thrown everything, at your disposal. Restrictions are sometimes really good. One of my favorite films, one of the films I can never say it about my own, but like I really think that changed the way I think. Like I basically had no money, and that really defined. We said, okay, we're just going to have one lens, no sticks, no wasting time with change of lenses and all that, and it leads to a strictness in your cinematic language that the audience feels in the movie, and it becomes much more coherent sometimes. So I never really, worry about not having enough money. It's just about finding the right solutions to tell the story in an interesting way. And I never feel that, I didn't feel like, but we didn't have enough time in prep. We didn't have enough time shooting. And, in the end, when you count it, a movie like this that ends up 2 hours, you're probably going to show 2.5 hours, I assume, something like this. We had 40 days. If you break it down, that's like 15 days per 60 minutes or 16 days. It's actually almost the same. like a television series. You know, I think on Patrick Melrose I had 15 days per hour, so it's actually the same. It's no difference, yeah, and I think I don't make it big difference. You know, if you have a story that is told the best way in 5 hours, then it's going to be a television series, and should still look stunning. You know, I don't think I don't want to accept that has to look like a boring television series. You know, you just have to, somehow, let's try to make it look great.
Hi, I just I had a question about finding authenticity in the environment. You know, it feels like a bubble that everybody's in, and you're kind of peering through the bubble as an audience member. And just wondered if you spent much time with any cardinals, or like, you know, going into that world and as part of pre-production and prep, and how that might have influenced your performances that you got out of actors, and also whether you met any characters yourself in that world.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I mean, first of all, we had a wonderful novelist who had written a very well-researched book that we had access to, and to all his research. We got introduced to a bunch of priests and bishops and cardinals who helped us enter this world and described how basically their daily life more than... None of them are going to tell you what goes on when the doors close of the conclave, because they can't. They have a vow of silence, and not many have taken part in one, and so you don't really know what's going on behind those closed doors, except some things are really well documented, like the way they vote. And when the Pope dies, that's all documented, the ring and the sealing of the room and the prayer that is said. So you can research that. And the way my best sort of friend on set, and Rafe's best friend, was a gentleman called Francesco Bonomo, and he's a religion teacher in Rome. And he had much fun advising a movie. And you could always ask him, so what do they do now? What would they do now? And I asked him this in prep. So once I asked him, so how do the cardinals walk up there? Because I didn't, and how do they vote? Because that's how you design, that's how I would design the shots. And sometimes I wanted to make it different, or something that would require slightly different blocking. And I would ask him, do you think this is possible? And he would go, yeah, sure. Why not? It's a movie. For example, what I can guarantee you is not real, authentic, is Rafe's position in the Sistine Chapel. I had thought I had a floor plan when I did the shot list, and I said Rafe should be sitting there in the center, so he can look this way. Like if the camera's in the middle, one eye line is to Sergio and the other eye line is to Tedesco, and then maybe closer to cameras to Lucien, to Adeyemi. And Stanley is on his side. I kind of had that, and Carlos is somewhere behind him. So for every character, for every one of his opponents or colleagues, he had a different eye line, and that felt very important to me. Rafe is an absolute fiend for authenticity. And so he asked Francesco. Francesco kept coming up to me and said to me, Rafe keeps asking me, where do I sit? And I can't, shall I tell him? He said, yeah, tell him the truth, but that's not where he's going to sit in the movie. And so I remember the first day we went in the set of the Sistine Chapel, and Rafe sits in his chair and tests it out and thinks about it. And then he just comes to me and says, I just want to discuss one last time. Are you sure I'm sitting in the right place? Shouldn't I be sitting? Because he sits right up front to the right of the table in the first row, just so that his path isn't that long. But I just said, no, I think this is absolutely imperative that you sit there. And I was able to sell it to him. But, things like that, you have to take license, because I think if he just sits on that front corner, he's just going to look to John Lithgow there, to Sergio there. It's all going to be on this side until it's all off camera, like until we see the back of his head in a way. And so that it's like just a very logical kind of movie decision.
Ed, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's very kind. Thank you.
This podcast was recorded at a Directors UK member event. You can hear plenty more directors in conversation by subscribing on the usual streaming platforms. Follow us on social media and find out more about us at directors.uk.com.